Welcome to this video on Bodhicaryavatara, chapter 7, verse 71. This follows directly on from verse 70, which is why it opens with the word tasmat, meaning therefore, referring back to verse 70. Tasmad utsangage sarpe yathutishtati satvaram nidralasya game tadvat pratikurvita satvaram. I'll read it again with the text up. Here we are. Tasmad utsangage sarpe yathutishtati satvaram nidralasya game tadvat pratikurvita satvaram. Tasmat, which becomes ending normally with a t, but by santi tasmad utsangage, it is from the pronoun tat, meaning that, and the ablative tasmat, from that. Rather the same construction as the English therefore, meaning proceeding from that. So it means therefore, for that reason, tasmat. Just yata, just as, uttishtati, he or she, uttishtati, stands up, tishtati, stands, uttishtati, rises up, stands up. Satvaram, hastily, suddenly. The word tvara means haste, not just speed, but haste. There's a feeling of a jerky movement. Oddly enough, cognate with our English word twirl, a sudden movement, a twirly movement. You do it suddenly. That's tvara. And satvara means with haste, hastily, and used as an adverb, as very often happens in Sanskrit and Pali. Just use the neuter form of the adjective in an adverbial sense. So satvaram, hastily. So just as somebody stands up hastily, utsangage sarpe, the sarpa, meaning a snake, cognate with the Latin serpen, serpere, from which we have our English serpent, something that creeps or slithers along. So utsangage, the word utsanga means the lap, as in a baby, babies in their mother's lap, or laptop, so the lap. So if you're sitting down and you see a snake crawling onto your lap, you get up rather rapidly, or do whatever you do whenever a snake crawls onto your lap like that. So it's the utsanga, utsanga the lap, with the suffix ga. Now I'll just call up iPad here. We have the root gum, meaning to go. It frequently happens that a verbal root is put at the end of a compound. So we would expect to see something like utsanga gum or utsanga gamma. But with this particular root, gum, what happens is when it comes at the end of a compound, it just shortens itself to ga and then acts like any ordinary akaranta shabda. That's acts like any ordinary, declines like any ordinary noun or adjective ending in an a. So utsangaga means literally lap going. So it's gone onto your lap. We see that this is in the locative, utsangage serpe. That is the locative absolute. That's describing the attendant circumstance. A snake being gone onto one's lap. is the meaning. So the snake being on your lap, you get up quickly. Locative for that, utsangage serpe, just like in English. Well, in Latin, of course, you have the ablative absolute, that being the case. In English, that being the case. In Latin, rebus sic stantibus, literally things thus standing. But in the absolute, it's known as the absolute, the ablative absolute, rebus sic stantibus. And in English, we can say things are so, and therefore we can also say things being so, or matters being so. That way of expressing it in English is exactly reflects the ablative absolute of Latin and the locative absolute of Sanskrit and Pali. So utsangagah sarpa, a snake that's gone onto your lap. Utsangage serpe, the snake being gone into your lap. This locative absolute construction. Where were we? So yata uttishtati. I'm trying to work off two screens here. Yata uttishtati. See there. As one stands up. So the yata, just as, and it is the correlative is tadvat. You can have mostly you see yata tata, but you can have yadvad tadvat, yata tadvat, yadvat tata. They have the same meaning and they can both stand in correlation to each other. Yata and tata are the more common words, but you'll often see tadvat, yadvat, and tadvat used instead. Just as in the preceding verse, we had yadvat standing for yata and with exactly the same meaning. So yata, just as uttishtati, he, she, it stands up, meaning one generally, just as one stands up, satvaram, in a hurry, hastily, utsangage serpe, the snake being gone onto the lap, literally by or with the lap gone snake. Tadvat, in that same way. Nidra alasya agame. Now, gum, coming. I'll do laptop again. Gum coming, gum going, just had that. With the gum, to come, slightly irregular verbs, you know, it's not gamati, but gachati, agachati comes. So we have the agama, meaning the coming, the advent, the arrival. And of course, as many of you will know, there are the scriptures known as the agamas. The agama, the coming, it's just anything that has come to you, like the scriptures that have been passed down, the scriptures of the tradition. One speaks, I think, particularly of the agamas translated into Chinese, that the things that have come down to us, the comings. So, nidra alasya, nidra. There's actually a root dra, often meaning sleep, and it's nidra. Dra is actually cognate with our English word drowsy, and with dream, and with the Latin dormire, to sleep, which of course it comes virtually unchanged into the other modern Romance languages. Dormire in Italian, dormir in French, dormir in Spanish. It's the same root, dra. So nidra, sleeping in, dropping off, nodding off, nidra. Also doesn't mean, it has a slightly specialized meaning. It's not just an ordinary sleep. You have kind of nidra yoga, sleep yoga, and also have the other way around, the yoga nidra, means a kind of drowsy state induced by certain um, yogic practices. So that's the drowsiness. And now the alasya, laziness, lethargy, is actually from the root las, meaning quick movement, making a quick movement. But the root on its own is actually very rare. I don't think I've seen in my reading any verb using that root. But it makes a verbal noun alessa, meaning a movement. And if you are alessa, you are unmoving. And the word is used to mean lazy. Just can't be bothered to get a move on, unmoving. Alessa. Now you can make an abstract noun out of it by vriddhi of the a and changing the final syllable to ya. So alasya. So alasa, lazy or lethargic. Abstract noun alasya, which then becomes the same as the English laziness, lethargy. So nidra alasya would be the drowsiness lethargy, or the lethargy of drowsiness. So nidra alasya agame. Agame, note here this is in the locative. Here it's the locative of time. So upon the coming of. So if you feel the drowsiness of lethargy or laziness coming, or upon the coming, the drowsiness, lethargy coming. Tadvat, so just as, in that way, so the yatha just as, tadvat, in that same way, nidra alasya agame, nidra lasyagame, upon the coming of the lethargy, drowsiness, pratikurvita satvaram. This is from the pratikurvita, it's from the root kri, to do, with our prefix prati, often has the meaning of a reciprocity or counter. So pratikri is counteract, counter-do, counteract, exactly as we say in English. That's the form, the word is formed in the same way. Pratikri, counteract. The conjugation of this is slightly complex. This is an atmanepada, optative, and it is a slightly irregular class 5 verb, making kurvita in the atmanepada optative third person singular, one might. So pratikurvita, one here means one should counteract. Satvaram, immediately. In other words, if you see this drowsiness, the lethargy of drowsiness coming upon you, you should react to it or counteract it with the same suddenness and speed as if a snake had crawled onto your lap. So let's do it again. Oh, I've lost my text boxes again. I'll just pause and try and get them back. Right, got the text boxes back. So I'll read it again twice before we wind up and say anything else that may come into that might be useful. Tasmad utsangage sarpe yato tishtati satvaram nidralasyagame tadvat pratikurvita satvaram. tasmadutsangage sarpe yathotishtati satvaram nidralasyagame tadvat pratikurvita satvaram. Now, one last point on grammar. Oh, lost the text boxes again. Pratikurvita, the third singular optative Atmanepada. Why Atmanepada rather than the Atmanepada? Sorry, why the Atmanepada rather than the Parasmaipada? In classical Sanskrit, which is what we're dealing here, there are many verbs that will indiscriminately take one or the other with no real difference of meaning. Back in Vedic times, there was more of a difference in meaning. The Atmanepada would more commonly mean doing something for oneself. The Parasmaipada, the emphasis would be on doing something for somebody else. That distinction is pretty much observed in Vedic, but had been largely lost, preserved to a certain extent, but largely lost in classical Sanskrit. So the parasmaipada form, rather than pratikurvita, pratikuryat, could equally have been used without any real change of meaning. So there we are. That concludes this video on chapter 7, verse 71.